Good evening, everyone. I'm Manners, and I'm joined by Paul Dennett. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening, Amenez. G'day, everyone.
Yeah, welcome to Cricket Unfiltered. It's a really exciting time here in Australia. The World Cup is underway, and Australia's campaign begins this weekend against New Zealand at the SCG on our doorstep. Paul, the World Cup begins, and I thought, perfect time to record our World Cup preview. It's Monday night Australian time, so it gives everyone time to digest our in-depth form guide before the big game on the weekend. But Paul, I mean, if the early stages anything to go by, we are in for a humdinger of a tournament.
Yes, yesterday was a lot of fun, upset, and then a real thriller in the second game. Amenez, you're right, it is an ideal time to record, but it shows what affection I have for you and for the listeners that I have agreed to this because the Australia game that has just been completed, the warm-up game, normally, because I was at work, I wasn't able to watch it. I would normally be now in a media blackout. And as we speak, would be watching it, but I have sacrificed that. I know the result. I thought it would be a bit much to do the podcast and just expect everyone to not talk about it. So yes, really looking forward to the World Cup. I'm going to that game. I know you are at the SCG. I don't know what the long range forecast is, but with Sydney at the moment, I hope that it's not going to rain. But 45,000, plenty of Kiwis in the house. It could be a really good night.
I mean, a couple of things. With the weather, one thing I've learned in the last couple of years that as wet as it is in Sydney, the SCG has incredible drainage. So for those around the world, you could be looking at the forecast, but rest assured, if the clouds part on Saturday for the game, they don't need a lot of time to get the ground ready for play. So that's a positive sign. And with that practice game against India, I jumped on a live watch along with some guys at cricket.com, and it was a very hollow match, I've got to say, Paul. What I don't understand is you got two teams that have been playing non-stop cricket. They don't need a warm-up game. It's just the ICC cashing in on it, and wholly unnecessary.
Yeah, it's interesting because just first on your SCG point, absolutely the ground drains fantastically, but what we need is a bloody roof. The New South Wales government. I know it's not the easiest architectural thing, given that the Noble and the Bradman stands are about 5 times the size of the members and the ladies' pavilions. So it could be quite an interesting looking roof, but that's surely what the government should be doing. But I read with interest that the fans weren't even allowed in at the Gabba today, and that there were some very disgruntled fans who had turned up expecting to go. And look, I understand from the ICC's point of view that A, they want to make sure that fans are turning up to the games that actually count, and B, you'd have to have security, you'd have to have catering and all of that. But it just doesn't sit well with me. It's not a nice look that you think that they would have been able to throw the gates open at the Gabba, have a couple of people selling a bit of food and drink in there, and get a few thousand people in. I just find it a little disappointing they weren't allowed in, even if it turned out to be quite a hollow game. What do you think?
Yeah, I read the ICC's comments on it that because these warm-up games can be cancelled or changed, they like to keep them flexible, so they don't want to ticket them. But I think where the confusion comes in is, so India organised some warm-up games in Perth, and those weren't official ICC warm-up games, and spectators were allowed to go in. So if you're an Indian fan in Brisbane, you think, oh, well, why can't I go to this game here when they're going to the game at the Wacker? And also, it's disappointing Brisbane don't have any Indian games in the World Cup, so it would have been their sort of only chance to see them. But yeah, I just think they shouldn't play them. I mean, they're just a waste of time.
Yeah, I think ticketing it, they just said open the gates up, let them in for free, and maybe have a sign up say, look, there's not going to be much here. You might have to bring your own lunch, kind of thing. There'll be 1 or 2 people selling some food, but just it's only a 3-hour game. You can pop out and get some food at the restaurant, as Ishant Sharma did a few years ago when they wouldn't allow him, when he wasn't happy with the quality of the food at the Gabba. But I think that's very much up to the players, that if the players value this game, then by all means have it. If I was India, I'd want as much practice on Australian pitches as possible. I know it's not like it used to be that the conditions are so foreign to them that because these days they travel around the world so much more often. But if I was India, I'd actually value having a hit out on the Gabba in Australian conditions. But you're right. If the players say, "Oh, we're doing this only out of obligation," then they should have cancelled it for sure.
I mean, yeah, it didn't look great. But anyway, look, a lot to look forward to in this episode. Paul and I have divided up the two groups and are going to analyze each of the groups. Then we're going to pick our semi-finalists and finalists for the T20 World Cup. So we're going to put our necks on the line again. I famously said Australia could not win the last World Cup. And look, I don't know, got it wrong. Fair enough.
And I'd like to famously say that I famously disagree with you and said they were every chance of winning. I didn't predict them, but I gave them a decent chance. And, it's good that you're finally aware of that.
And we're also going to dissect a couple of the cricket headlines from the last couple of days, but it's mainly a preview. And also just wanted to discuss for the listeners of the podcast and those watching on YouTube, what's going to happen throughout the T20 World Cup. So Paul and I are going to try and record an episode after every Australian game, whether that's the day of, the day after, basically as soon as we can. We're going to try and record a review of the Australian games. I'll be going to some other games, so I might be just jumping on with the odd little update. And then things like the WBBL don't get lost. I might do the odd bonus episode. I might ring. I'm arranging to speak to Brittany Carter from ABC about the WBBL next week, and we can look back at the couple of weeks. So yeah, it's not really going to be the same sort of schedule for Cricket Unfiltered. A bit more focusing on the World Cup and the WBBL in sort of shorter episodes. But yeah, a lot of content coming. Paul, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm always ready for cricket, and I can't wait. I think it's going to be potentially a fantastic tournament, and I hope that the Australian people kind of get behind it. I mean, the crowds, I think, will be good. The crowd was really good at the first game between Sri Lanka and Namibia down in Geelong. But I remember 2015, because it wasn't on free-to-air except for the Aussie games, that it sort of ticked along a little bit in the background. I hope that doesn't happen this time.
Same. All right, so let's get into the cricket headlines. I just want to touch on a couple of things around the Australian team, Paul. They ended up losing that series to England 2-0. I think the last time we recorded was after the first match. So for those listening, they lost the second match, and then the third match was abandoned. But Australia weren't looking good there when the rain came. I was disappointed. Aaron Finch in the press conference afterwards said how the team was sort of fatigued, and he sort of said they were tired from all the cricket over the last month or so. And I just thought they were silly comments. And, Australia were just outplayed by England in that series. And I think he just should have said that.
I don't mind. I've got no problem with it. I mean, I hadn't heard those comments till I saw you mention them in the notes. It's not as though they went really widespread. I think you were just giving an honest answer. They're warm-up matches that ultimately doesn't make a difference at all.
Yeah, but dare I say that Australia maybe are a little bit complacent after their World Cup win last year. They seem to have this kind of swagger. Oh, we've cracked the code. Don't worry about us. And little things like maybe carrying, say, Aaron Finch, who's not in 100% form. I don't know. I'm just worried that Australia's a bit complacent. Blaming fatigue against England, and yeah, it's making me nervous.
I don't think they're complacent at all. I think that would be extraordinary if they were, because the pressure is big. They would know that it's a home World Cup. They're expected to win it or go very close to winning it. I don't think there's any complacency. However, I agree with you that the decision to not drop Finch, whether you call that complacency or just sort of lack of ruthlessness, we've spoken about it at length on this podcast, that as much as I like him and I want him to do well, and he still might do well, I don't think he's currently in our best 8 batters, so I wouldn't have picked him. And I think it's a disappointing thing that the selectors did, although he did play well against India today. But I don't think you'd call that complacency. There's probably another word for it. Lack of ruthlessness, I would say.
Would Bill Belichick have stuck with Finch? I don't think so.
No. And I love that you're riffing off my points, because I think it was a few weeks ago I said, would Alex Ferguson stick with Finch? And he said, no. I mean, and look, nothing would give me greater pleasure than if at the end of the World Cup we could clip that little bit there and put it next to Finch getting 100 in the final and winning it for us. I'd be absolutely delighted if that would happen.
And then in the T20 World Cup itself, we had, someone at the door. In the T20 World Cup itself, we had 2 results. Namibia beat Sri Lanka already. So an incredible start to the tournament. Just a huge upset. What did you think of the match, Paul?
Yeah, I didn't get to watch all of it, but I watched the concluding stages, and I was following it along all the time. And I gave Namibia a real chance. I had a little bit of money on them before the match, and then I felt like an idiot when they were sort of 15 overs in. Sri Lanka had reduced them to shambles, and it was quite an extraordinary comeback. From I got the shock of my life when I checked back down and saw that they'd scored 160 odd. And then Sri Lanka never got close to it. And then the second game between Namibia and the Netherlands, both sides struggled to get much more than 100. So it wasn't the easiest pitch to bat on. But Namibia showed what they showed a year ago, that they are a quality, decent sort of side. They remind me a little bit of Ireland or Scotland, that they rarely are going to put in a terrible performance. They're pretty good. They've got some South African players in there. They're a pretty decent side, and any top side up against them, if they're not on their game, they could make it a match. But really disappointing for Sri Lanka. I still think that they could do something in this tournament. Realistically, they should still get through into the group stage, and maybe they could do something. They won the Asia Cup. They'll be getting better with the conditions as the tournament progresses, but a disastrous start, no doubt.
I was surprised how poor Sri Lanka were in that effort. I thought coming off the Asian Cup, they'd at least be, I don't know, a little bit more competitive. But, what was impressive was Namibia's finish to their batting innings. They got off to a slow start, but in that last 10 overs, they found the boundary a lot. I think it was JJ Smith was hitting the ball really well. And they just... I could tell once they got above 140 on that Cardinia Park pitch, it was always going to be tough to chase because it does slow up and get hard to score runs. So really impressive for them. A good start. The Dutch beat the UAE in the second game, a tight game on the same pitch, but not quite as impressive, the Dutch against the UAE.
They're probably the two sides least favoured to do well in that, but I think that it was a topsy-turvy sort of game, that one, that for long parts of the Dutch innings, they looked like they had the game absolutely shot to bits. They're chasing such a small total. They got out of the blocks quickly, and then they kind of got marooned, and they looked like they were going well again, and then lost a couple of wickets. And then at the end, the UAE really should have won it. They got it to kind of a point where they had the game in the bag, and I think they just showed a little bit of nerves by... They probably needed to cluster the batter a little bit more, take the risk that a few boundaries would be hit, and then choke them and ice the game. They just kept on allowing them to tick along at 6 and over, and they got across the line. So yeah, pretty exciting end to the first day.
Yeah, very exciting. And as we record this, Scotland are on the verge of beating the West Indies. So I'll update you as we record. It always plays well in podcasting. But before we get into our preview, Paul, I just wanted to update the listeners in the commentary lineup we're going to hear for the next month or so, because the ICC released their full commentary list. Now, for those watching on YouTube, you can see I put it up. For those listening, I'm going to just run through it with I'll do the first half, Paul, and you can pick up from Michael Clark. So Adam Gilchrist, Athar Ali Khan, Barzid Khan, Brian Murgatroyd, Carlos Brathwaite, Dale Steyn, Danny Morrison, Dirk Nannis, Owen Morgan, Harsha Bogle, Ian Bishop, Ian Smith, Isha Gua, Mark Howard, Mel Jones, Mike Atherton,
Michael Clark, Nasser Hussain, Natalie Germanos, Niall O'Brien, Pommy Mbangwa, Preston Momsen, Ravi Shastri, Russell Arnold, Samuel Badri, Shane Watson, Sean Pollock, Simon Dool, Sunil Gavaskar.
Yeah, and I've just got a few takeaways from that commentary lineup. I really like it. I think it's got a really good balanced feel to it. Commentators from all over the world. I always get a surprise when Michael Clark pops up in a commentary lineup because, he struggles to get, a job in Australia. He's just not the most popular guy here, but whenever there's an ICC tournament, he seems to get into the list of commentators.
Yeah, it's very true. Wasn't that long ago, wasn't it, when they sort of had the Australian summer? There was a colossal list across all of radio and television, the various different networks, and they added it all up. And I don't know how many there were, but he wasn't in it. Yeah, you're right. He does still get... he's more popular abroad than he is at home, it seems.
Yeah, you're right, Paul, because there's like 3 radio stations in Australia that cover the cricket sometimes. There's 2 TV networks if you count. So, and you can't get a job with any of them.
I
Well
suppose
done.
just to be fair to him, I suppose in recent times, given that he's on the big sports breakfast on 2K or on Sky Radio, whatever it's called, he probably couldn't go on to another radio network.
That's true. Well done. There's a few people there, but Mark Howard and Brian Murgatroyd, great to see them getting a go on being very highly skilled broadcasters, amongst a lot of ex-cricketers. And I think Shane Watson is a commentator to watch. He wouldn't immediately jump out at you as someone who's going to be a great commentator, but I actually think he's a very studious, very thorough person, and I think he'll actually be a pretty good commentator.
I hear you. He could get along the lines of kind of the Ricky Ponting, Gary Neville from football kind of commentator, ex-player whose technical knowledge of the game just is so superior that it makes him worth listening to. I could hear you on that, but I just, from what I've heard of him so far, I think he's got that potential, but I'd like him to sort of only speak when he's really got something to say, which is kind of against the modern trend. The modern trend, I think that if they're silent for more than 2 seconds, if they're not saying, geez, Australia really wants a wicket here, or Aaron Finch would like to score some runs today, or something like that, then they get in trouble. I think sometimes there's a little bit of the Richie Benaud needs to come back into it and just calm down and only say something when you've got something to say. But I think the lineup overall, can't complain. There's not really anyone in there that I have to mute it for.
Any favourites?
The favourites, as always, Atherton and Hussain are the 2 best commentators in the world. And I also really like Ian Smith. I'm pleased he's back because I know that he's got a job on SEN, so he's kind of not commentating as much as he used to. I like Bazid Khan. I've always liked him. And there's no one there I really can't stand. Who else do I really like? Simon Dool. I quite like him as well. But yeah, most of them, they're pretty good, pretty inoffensive, I'd say.
Good. Well, as usual, I'll be watching most of the cricket on mute, so it won't really matter. All right. Now let's get into our World Cup preview. So obviously we've got the preliminary stages now, and Paul and I are just going to cover Group 1 and Group 2 and the 8 teams that have qualified. I guess before we do that, Paul, are there any teams you could think that can win from the preliminary stage? Because I actually don't think there is.
Well, there's a few less than they were yesterday, given that Sri Lanka and West Indies haven't really started all that well.
And
they
would
have been the first.
Lost.
Right. Well, that's congratulations to Scotland.
Yes, the Scottish.
When I first arrived, first time in Scotland with my now wife, then girlfriend, and we met her cousins, and they'd been pre-warned that I was a big cricket fan. And the first thing they said is, you'll not be seeing any cricket pitches up here. And I said, what's that? And they were, oh, that's the only cricket pitch around. And I was like, that's a terrible Scottish accent. But so I'm sure.
You did it, though.
I'm sure they're absolutely dancing in the streets of Glasgow tonight.
Or this morning.
Yeah, congratulations. I'm sure it's absolutely rocking the world of Scotland.
Absolutely.
There are more Scottish cricket fans than you think. A few times I've been at the Ashes in England, I've sat next to someone who's turned out to be from Scotland. So there's a small but passionate group of fans up there. So good on them. Sad for the West Indies, but good on Scotland.
Do you think any team can win from preliminary? Because I don't. I just want to get you on record.
No, I agree. But you can never say never. But I don't expect any team to win.
Okay, good. All right, so let's do we've got Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1 is Afghanistan, Australia, England, New Zealand. Group 2 is Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and South Africa. I think we'll do Group 1 first, then we'll do Group 2. I asked Paul in preparing to mount a case for why each team could win and why they couldn't win, as well as look at their records recently. So, Paul, take it away with Group 1.
And right at the last moment, I realized Men has also asked me for how they'd gone since the last World Cup. And I said, where did you get that from? And I thought maybe he'd give me a link, and he just replied, Cricinfo. So I actually had to manually count them up. So thanks for that, Menez.
I had to go in and Cricinfo to StatsGuru and do each team individually, like select the day after the World Cup final to the most recent date and do it that way.
Oh, okay. No, I thought there was an article you had.
No,
No, I did.
I wouldn't. If I had a shortcut, I would have given it to you.
I did the
Not
same
like
thing.
withholding information.
No, I thought you were. I did the same thing, but just on house stat. And I think it probably took me half as long. So anyway, England.
Show off.
Now, are we going to read the squads out?
I don't think so. I think maybe just
Okay, sure.
You just I don't think read the squads out. Just maybe pick a few players you think. But
all right. So anyway, since in 2021, topped their group, then lost the semi. Bit unlucky. They were probably the team of the tournament. Had to bat first against New Zealand. Batting first in those conditions was never good. Interestingly, since that, now that I've done the stat, we might as well use it. Since the 2021 World Cup, played 21, won 10, lost 10, won no result. It's not quite as good a result as a record as I would have expected from England. But nevertheless, I think that they are probably the second favourites for the tournament. Butler, Milan, and Hales, three really top players. Milan has just been in great form for a really long time. Harry Brook is one to look out for. Averaging 35 with a strike rate of 150 in T20 cricket. Phenomenal record, but hasn't really been able to do the job in Australia. I think that must be an anomaly, and he'll have to come good at some stage. Another one with superpower, Liam Livingstone, a strike rate of 146. Phil Salt, a strike rate of 150. So those six batters that I've just named then, and then you throw in Moeen Ali and Ben Stokes as well, you've got some superb batting in there. I kind of thought, is Moeen Ali getting on a little bit? But he's looked pretty good in Australia so far. Always been one of my most favorite players. But be interesting to see how he'll get. Interesting to see if Stokes plays in every game. It's incredible that's how good their side is, that he might even get squeezed out. The interesting thing for me is their bowling. And you've made this point before, Menners, and I really kind of agree with you. You look at their bowling, it's pretty good. And some of their quicks, Wokes, Wood, Jordan, Topley, Willie, they're all pretty good. But Wokes, phenomenal bowler in England, disastrous in Australia. The other night in Canberra, when he got English conditions, he showed what he could do. He looked fantastic, but that's the only time he's ever looked good in Australia. Wood is the interesting one, that he's just, like all these super quick bowlers, he gets smashed everywhere or he could win you a game. And then Chris Jordan's had this huge reputation as being the icer, the finisher. And I've seen him do some good things, but I'm not sure if he's quite as highly regarded. He's got overall economy rate of 8.6, which is not so great. Then Topley looks a clever bowler, reminds me a bit kind of in a sort of way of Kane Richardson, a sort of the guy that bowls lots of clever slower balls and does lots of clever things, but still gets hit around a little bit. Again, economy rate 8.2, not all that inspiring. So why will they win it? I think they're close to the best. I think they're pound for pound probably the second best team in the tournament. And why they won't win, I'm just a bit concerned with those quicks. I didn't mention Adil Rashid. He's a fine spinner, but if they don't win it, I think it'll be because of their quick bowling.
Yeah, I thought the English bowling in the series against Australia was impressive. So they've probably gone up a couple of notches, but really good wrap up of the English team. All right, the next team in Group 1.
All right, so New Zealand, last World Cup, lost the final to Australia, having beaten England in the semis. Had to bat first, which was a disadvantage, but since the last World Cup, they've played 18, won 12, and lost 6. Interesting names of them. Kane Williamson. I find it fascinating how it wasn't that long ago that everyone was talking about the big four in Test cricket of Williamson, Smith, Root, and Kohli, and that in T20 cricket, they're all kind of going down the same path, some further than others. I mean, Root's long gone out of the England setup. Smith's on the borderline of being out of the Australian 11. There's a lot of questions about Williamson's position in the side, and Kohli's not the dominant figure that he once was, but he's obviously still the preeminent one of those in T20 cricket. So interesting how Williamson will fit in, but they do have some superpower. And I've talked about Finn Allen before on this podcast, but to have a strike rate of 172, which is 10 more than Tim David, which is 10 more than Glenn Maxwell, which I thought was previously about as high as you could get. That's amazing. I can't believe that he's not a certain starter in their side. Glenn Phillips, a strike rate of 141. They've got some super power hitting. Conway's all class. Neesham can smash it as well. He's got a strike rate of 142. Mitchell's pretty good. And then they've got Guptill, who's kind of like a little bit in the Aaron Finch category. Fine player, but maybe not quite at the top of his game. But that batting, if it clicks, is really, really powerful. And then their quick bowling, Ferguson and Milne, very quick bowlers, and their economy are at 7.6, each of them in T20 cricket. That's better than I expected when I looked it up. Southey's going to be interesting. I think he's a very improved T20 bowler. saw a New Zealand fan the other day saying that he wouldn't pick him because he doesn't think he's suited to Australian pitches. Possibly a fair point. They've got obviously Trent Bolt is their out and out number one quick, and I think he'll have a great tournament. They've got a few spinners to choose from. I think Santner will play. Ish Sodhi I've seen do really well in the Big Bash before. They've got Michael Bracewell, who's an offie who incidentally can bat really well, averaging 32, strike rate of 135. And just on figures, early days, a bowling economy rate of 6.6. I think it would be interesting. If I was New Zealand, I'd be tempted to load up a little bit on the spin and say spin dominates the Big Bash. We can afford to take a bit of a gamble. All these sides that are going to go in pace heavy because it's Australia, maybe if the Big Bash form from recent years holds true, you're better off going in with a few more spinners. So why they can win, genuine firepower with the bat. And if they've got as I just described, a pretty decent sort of set of bowlers. Why they wouldn't win, I suppose, if you're being brutally honest, if they were to play Australia or England or India and either of those three sides play to their absolute best, I think their upside is slightly higher than New Zealand's. But I think New Zealand have a real chance of winning this tournament.
I heard Kane Williamson saying that there's a few injury concerns around Ferguson and Daryl Mitchell. I think Mitchell had a really good, was it World Cup, T20 World Cup, or really good? No, he had a really good tour of England last year.
Yes, he did, yeah.
So he's a player who might come good in this tournament, and they'd want him to be fit. But I agree with your assessment of New Zealand, another good side. All right, then the last two teams in the group, Afghanistan and Australia.
I'll stick with Australia first. So, of course, we won in 2021 from nowhere with the advantage of batting second in both the semi and the final. Since then, played 17, 10 wins, 6 losses, and 1 no result. I still think, and I might be proven completely wrong, I think Australia is the best side in the tournament, especially in Australian conditions. And I just look at that lineup of just sort of thinking of the power and class of David, Wade, Marsh, Stoinis, and Warner. Those 5 could all win a match for you. I don't think Inglis is necessarily going to feature, but he's a very fine player as well. Finch got some runs today against India. Presumably he's going to play. He might come good. He's still a decent player. And I haven't even mentioned Steve Smith. So I think that's a very, very powerful batting lineup. With the ball, Adam Zampa, I think, is pretty reliable. My one concern is just, and I didn't mention Maxwell, did I, in that batting list? Well, there you go. You can forget Glenn Maxwell. That's how awesome they are. I know that he's not in the greatest. He's probably got 20 odd or something today, but looking at the bowling, I'm not sure if Australia have it right in that, and everyone said this going into the last World Cup, here's Australia disrespecting the format. They just picked their bloody Test 11, their Test bowling lineup for the World Cup. And then they went and won the darn thing, which is like, how cool is that? But in Australian conditions, you'd think, well, that's even more logical. You might as well pick the Test bowling lineup because they're so fantastic. I've just been a little bit unimpressed with Hazelwood in the last couple of weeks. And
come on. You can't knock Hazelwood on this podcast.
I never knock Hazelwood. I'm entitled to knock Hazelwood because I'm one of his biggest supporters. But I just think, just in the last couple of weeks, I've lost a tiny bit of confidence. Now, that's still not much. I still think he's a fantastic bowler, but he's just been taken apart a little bit too easily for me. Same with Cummins. Both, if I'm picking my World Test 11, they're in it. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be in the side, but I just slight question mark over them. And I think that Stark always has a little bit of a question mark and also an exclamation mark. He'll win you the tournament or maybe go the other way. I wonder whether Australia might regret at the end of the tournament that they probably won't go very much with spin. And I think that Ashton Agar bowled today, got through 4 overs, so presumably his injury's gone. I think he should be given consideration for a spot in the 11. So why can they win it? I think that they are pound for pound just the best players, just the best side in the tournament. Why won't they win? Well, knockout games, anything can happen. And maybe that question mark I said over their bowling. And also Finch and Maxwell, and to an extent, but Finch and Maxwell not in the greatest of form. There's a little bit of a question mark there as well.
Yep, another great assessment. The guys today on the show I was on were saying they thought Ellis was unlucky not to make it into the squad, and I wonder if he'd be a stronger option than Cummins in just a specialist.
Yes.
All right, last team.
Just yeah,
Sorry, go
I
on.
agree with that. It sounds like heresy to say it because Cummins is just fantastic. But if I'm watching and it's a key game in the World Cup and Ellis is running into bowl, as an Australian fan, I'm feeling more confident than if Cummins was there. So yeah, I've said it many times in this podcast. I would have Green and Ellis in the squad ahead of Finch and someone, probably Richardson, and then definitely get Ellis into the 11. But the squad that they've got is still very, very good. Afghanistan were slightly disappointing in the last World Cup. I think there was a feeling that in those conditions in the UAE, this could have been their breakout tournament. They only finished fourth in Group 2. The only two teams they beat were Scotland and Namibia, the two qualifying teams. So they were exciting to watch. I remember the game they played against Pakistan with the big stadium, big crowd in attendance, and they're kind of like really going for it. That was when you factor in their tremendously exciting batting plus their quality of spin bowling, they're very easy on the eye side to watch. So they've got Zadran, Gurbaz, and Zazai. The sort of the bulk of their batting. They've got Ibrahim Zadran, a young player who's also coming in, who is good. But the key, obviously, is their spin. They've got Mohammad Nabi, Rashid Khan, and Majib. So you've got potentially 12 pretty fantastic overs out of them. It's going to be very interesting watching them play Australia at the Adelaide Oval. Some of the Aussies might actually be cheering on Rashid Khan. I've got a couple of younger quicks, Faruqi and Farad Ahmad Malik. So I suppose, why would they win? I mean, it's stretching it a bit. No one expects them to win. But if they were to win, I suppose you'd look back and say maybe it was a tournament that really did favour spin bowling, and their spin bowling is possibly the best of them all. And they do have that aggressive batting intent that can mean that sometimes in T20 cricket, you get on a bit of a roll. You can ride your luck and do plenty of exciting things. So why won't they win? I suppose they're not quite as consistent or as good as the best teams. But one of these days, they are going to have a breakout tournament. They've got such talent that they could, go all the way to a semi-final or a final. I don't think it's going to be this one, but kind of as a cricket fan, I wouldn't be disappointed if they did.
Yeah, I'm sort of, I don't know, I'm having a bit of a sort of moral dilemma with the Afghanistan team at the moment. I need to sort of come to some place of, where I make it. I just, I read some articles about, girls being banned from schools in Afghanistan. And I just wonder if they have a place in international cricket going forward. And I really need to do some more research to make a proper sort of formed opinion on this. But it does make me uneasy.
Yeah, it's a good point. I would agree with you. It's it's something that maybe at one stage in the future, if we get kind of an expert on the podcast, I'd value their opinion.
Yeah, Craig Foster, the football broadcaster who does a lot of work with refugees, is recording in the studio this week. I'm going to try and ask him about it, even if he won't come on, just to try and get some background. Someone who knows about this a bit more. Anyway, great preview of Group 1. So Afghanistan, Australia, England, and New Zealand. I'll do Group 2, and then I think Paul and I will pick our, two semi-finalists from each group, and then two possible finalists. So I'll start with Bangladesh in Group 2 in the 2021 T20 World Cup. 5 losses. Since then, they've played 19 games, just won 4 with 14 losses. So they've been in terrible form. Afif Hussain is only 23 years old, and he's been their leading run scorer in T20 cricket since the last World Cup. But he's only striking around 120. He'll need to maintain that form, as will Liton Das, their wicketkeeper, who's a handy T20 player. But you look at their squad; it's pretty thin. Musudek Hussain, their off spinner, is probably their strongest bowler. He only concedes at around 7 runs and over across 120 T20. So that's a pretty good career. Shakib Al Hasan obviously is another one to watch, but it's a pretty thin squad. I think if they were to win, it would be because teams can get on a run in T20 cricket, but there's absolutely nothing to suggest that they would go on that run. And why they won't win is they don't have enough pace with the ball. They're very thin on quick bowlers, and they lack quality with the bat. And they're coming in bad form, and I can't see that changing, I've got to say.
Yeah, they don't feel like they're quite the sort of side they were several years ago when they felt like they were really kind of making strong strides. So yeah, hopefully they surprise.
Yeah, so I didn't really run through a lot of their plays, but they're captained by Shakib Al Hussain. Mustafiz Rahman has done well in patches in limited overs cricket. Sumya Saka, we've seen do good things against Australia. Taskin Ahmed, handy, but overall, as I said, just nothing to suggest they'll be challenging. And in fact, some of these teams in the preliminary stages look even better than the Bangladesh side. All right, so moving along to India. Wow, captained by Rohit Sharma. I guess the big talking points around this squad were the fact that Ravi Jadeja and Jasper Bumrah are both out injured, so I think they will be missed. In the last T20 World Cup, they won 3 and lost 2, and they did lose to Pakistan, and it's the first time they've lost to Pakistan in an ICC event for I think ever actually to that point. Since the T20 World Cup, they've been in outstanding form, 35 matches, 26 wins, and just 8 losses. That's a winning percentage of 3.25. So stunning run for India. And I look at their squad, and they do have all their bases covered. You know, Sharma, Rahul, Kohli, Rishabh Pant, Hardik Pandya, you know, power with the bat. Then with the ball, Mohammad Shami has just come into the squad and looks outstanding. Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, spinners Ashwin and Chahal, Aksa Patel, the all-rounder. I mean, they just look like a really well-balanced squad. But, you know, the player I picked out to watch out for is Surya Kumar Yadav.
Sky.
What did I say?
No, I was saying his nickname, Sky.
Sky, yes, exactly. His strike rate in T20 cricket is 177. I mean, it's just extraordinary. Since the last T20 World Cup, he's scored 864 runs at an average almost 40, striking at 180. So he'll be really difficult to stop. Bhuvaneshwar Kumar's been their leading wicket taker since the last World Cup, 35 wickets. Harsha Patel with 26 wickets and Chahal with 22. Aksa Patel with 22. So just they've got all the bases covered. And I think they will be really hard to stop. You know, we've seen them get a lot of support in Australia with fans. So, yeah, just got every base covered. That's why I think they'll win. Why they won't win, I think Ravi Jadeja is a big injury. I think he would have done really well in this tournament. So he's missing. Sometimes they can be a bit conservative with the bat at the top of the order. KL Rahul, Virat Kohli can take a little bit of time to get going. But I'm just, you know, I'm picking really small little spots there because I think this Indian team are a monster.
Yeah, I think that they are, as I said, along with Australia and England, deserving of being one of the 3 favourites. Just so that we're comparing like with like, your figure for Surya Kumar Yadav, that's him in T20 internationals. All the figures I've been giving have been in just T20 overall. His strike rate in T20 overall is 147, still fantastic. There's been a fair bit of speculation among Indian fans about the position of Shami and of Bhuvi in the side, which is interesting because today Bhuvi's taken 2 for 20 off 3 and Shami 3 for 1 off 3 for 4 off 1. So you say in the warm-up game today, they did fantastically well. I do think there's a little bit of a question though over their quick bowling, and obviously they're going to miss Bumrah significantly. You know, I'm just not absolutely convinced that their quick bowling is as good as it needs to be. But that's probably the only weakness. And I agree with you that occasionally they have the tendency to be a little bit conservative.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point with losing Bumrah, but if Shami's performance was anything to go by, he looks in good form. Ashdeep Singh, I guess, didn't bowl that well against Australia today, and he actually doesn't have the pace of some of the other bowlers, so he might get targeted if he's not careful. So that was India now to their fierce rivals, Pakistan, captained by Babar Azam, and you could make a case that they are, you know, in that sort of favourites category, having won all 5 group stage games in the last T20 World Cup, but they lost to Australia in the semi-final where Matt Wade famously hit 41 not out of 17 balls to steal it. So, unlucky for Pakistan in the last tournament. Shadab Khan, the leg spinner, I think, is another player to watch. But what I like about this Pakistan squad, a bit like India, got a really good mix of high quality batters, quality spin, and exceptional fast bowling. Harris Ralph, since the last T20 World Cup, has taken 28 wickets at an average of 21.57, economy 7.82. We've seen him do well for Australia in the Big Bash, and I think the bouncy pitches will suit him here. Nawaz, their left arm orthodox spinner, their second leading wicket taker, another exceptional T20 cricketer. His economy of 7.68 is very good for a spinner. And then, coming back from injuries, Shaheen Shah Afridi, who we've seen put in exceptional performances in all formats of the game. But, he's a bit like the Mitchell Stark of the Pakistan outfit. So, really good bowling. And then they're led by a couple of fine T20 players. Mohammad Rizwan, maybe the former T20 player in the world, in 24 matches since the last T20 World Cup, has scored 1,114 runs at an average of 53, a strike rate of 127. Babar Azam, 724 runs at a strike rate of 128. So they're the real shining lights for the Pakistan batting. Iftikhar Ahmed will back them up. Fakhar Zaman might play. So I really like this Pakistan side. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue the good form they showed in the last T20 World Cup. So I think their fast bowling and their top order is why they could win the tournament. Why they wouldn't, is I think their fielding might get found out a little bit on the big grounds of Australia, and I worry about some of their middle order players against the extra bounce of Australian pitches. But again, I think this Pakistan side is a very good one.
Yeah, I think you underestimate them at your peril, and my expectation is that they, along with India, are probably the two likely semi-finalists out of this group. I'd put Pakistan sort of probably bracketing with New Zealand as fourth favourite for the tournament overall.
Interesting. I didn't notice Mohammad Hasnain is in the squad, who's had some question marks over his action in the past. I've actually seen him bowling at the showgrounds in the Big Bash, and he's a really lightning quick bowler. But just be interesting whether his action might come under the microscope during this tournament. And then my final team in Group 2. So we've done Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. Now we finish it with South Africa, who in the last World Cup won 4 matches, lost 1, and then missed out on the semi-finals on net run rate. They're captained by Temba Bavuma. Quinton de Kock comes back into the side for the white ball stuff. Reza Hendricks is another good T20 player. Heinrich Klassen, Aidan Markram, David Miller, very powerful with the bat. I like their spinners, Keshav Maharaj and Tabraiz Shamsi. And then they've got exceptional fast bowling. I mean, Heinrich Nortje, Kagiso Rabada, Marco Jansen. Just keep naming them. You would not want to be facing these guys. David Miller, probably the most dangerous with the bat. In the 13 matches South Africa have played since the last World Cup, he's striking at 186. Riley Russo striking at 180. In those 13 matches, South Africa won 7 and lost 5. So not terrible form. Ngidi was their leading wicket taker, but then I said Rabada, Parnell, Marco Jansen, Nortje backed it up. And why they will win is their exceptional fast bowling and their big hitters. I think they don't have kind of the class that some of the other batting lineups have, but they've got the power. And, we've seen in T20 tournaments, if you can get on a run, that can be the difference, the power. And why they wouldn't win is they just choke in big tournaments. So, I mean, that's why they wouldn't win.
Yeah, I'd probably have them as my 6th favourite overall. So I'm not expecting them to make the semi-finals, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me if they did. I kind of agree with you that they're very decent side, but maybe player for player, maybe the second half of their, if you listed their batters from best to worst, the second half of their batters might not be as good as the second half of the batting lineup of some of the other sides. So, yeah, I think that they come into the tournament with a lot less expectations than they have in the past. Eventually, they're going to win one of these. I don't think it'll be this one, but who knows?
All right, so that's Group 2. Now, Paul, let's go back to Group 1. Afghanistan, Australia, England, New Zealand. Who are the two teams you think will make it to the semi-finals?
I think pretty boring answer, but I'll say Australia and England, with a special mention that New Zealand wouldn't surprise me at all if they made it. Put it this way: if the format was like the 2019 World Cup, where everyone played everyone, I probably would tip New Zealand to make the semis. I just think they're a bit unlucky to have both Australia and England in their group.
All right, so for Group 1, I think I think England and New Zealand will make it out of the group. England and New Zealand. I don't think Australia will progress in this tournament. I mean, I think England, you ran through their side really well. Will be tough to beat under Butler. And I just think right off New Zealand to your peril, listeners, because they keep performing in big tournaments. No one ever gives them a chance. And so I think England and New Zealand will make it out. I think Australia will lose a few close games, and that will cost them. I think that I wouldn't say they were lucky in the last World Cup, but they got over the line in some tight situations, and I don't think it'll happen in this tournament.
Yeah, they played really well in the last World Cup, but yeah, I wouldn't say they were lucky. I suppose it's turn of phrase. They had the luck with them a little bit. Will I invite you to echo your opinion ahead of the last World Cup? The Sheffield Shield's on; they can play. You said last time Australia shouldn't even turn up; they should just play the Sheffield Shield. Do you stand by that this time round?
No, because I think we have a duty to put out our best side at home. I'm not going to go on record saying we can't win this one because we have a much more settled side than we did last World Cup. But yeah, I can't see us getting out of the group. Group 2 now: Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, South Africa. I think I'm tipping Pakistan and South Africa to get out of this group. I just like both those teams. I think South Africa's fast bowling is going to just blow some teams away. And I think Pakistan, South Africa to make it out of the group. I think India will go close, but I think they'll lose to South Africa and Pakistan, and that'll ultimately be the difference.
Yeah, you could be right. They were disappointing last World Cup, India, but I think again I'm going to go with the boring prediction and tip the two favourites. So I think India and Pakistan are my two to come out of this group.
Okay, and I'm picking to win it, Pakistan or New Zealand.
Well, for what it's worth, I suppose I'm tipping the old firm to win the two semis and it to be an Australia-England final, and I'm tipping Australia to win.
I like it. Well, that'll cheer up the Australian listeners. All right, well, that was our World Cup preview. Anything you want to add about the tournament before we get into Can't Let It Go, Paul?
No, I've got one thing that I'm going to add, but I think it is in Can't Let It Go. So, yeah, bring it on.
All right. Well, let's get into Can't Let It Go. That little bit of cricket news that you just can't let go through to the keeper. Paul, take it away.
All right, two things. Well, number one, again, file this under first world problems. I just find it... I find it weird that they don't, as a matter of course, always have up during the runs chase how many runs are required off how many balls. I set this out on Twitter and someone had a go at me saying, oh, couldn't you work it out from the available data? Yes, I can. I can multiply by 6 and subtract and do all those sorts of things. But, I don't really watch cricket to have a little maths test. I just think it would be, and towards the end, they have it up in big things, 38 off 23. But when I'm watching a game, especially, but not exclusively, in the second half of the second innings, I'm looking at that all the time. And I'm always, okay, right. Is it to a ball yet? Is it just still 10 and over? I want that up there permanently. And it irritates me that it's not. Are you with me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a first world problem. And I've got a first world problem as well for you while we're whinging about little things. The Cricket Australia app has updated their app, and they used to have it, you could just scroll down and see all the fixtures, but now they've got it so each date they have fixtures on a sort of gallery panel, so you can't scroll down and see all the fixtures. You scroll down one date, then you have to scroll across to see all the fixtures on that date. Then you keep scrolling, whereas before you could just scroll down and see all the fixtures, and it's really annoying.
No, I'm with you. It's often the case that the actual where you think the source of truth should be for one of these tournaments, you have to go away from it because they've got too many bells and whistles. I want a really boring text format for fixtures with as no graphics, just so you can actually see it. But I suppose they've got to have make it pretty showy. But yeah, look, I think we could march on Parliament House on both those issues. And
I'm going to march on Jolimont.
March on Jolimont and take the headquarters away from Melbourne. They've been there too long.
Exactly.
It's demanding an overly too much familiarity with Melbourne suburbs to use Jolimont as a sort of a proxy term for Cricket Australia, which they tend to do. But yes, to move on to other big first world issues, it really annoys me that Channel 9, judging by what they're going with the first game, Australia versus New Zealand, it's only going to be shown on Gem. And I don't understand this. So Gem is Channel 9's secondary network, and people would say, well, everyone can turn it on. But for some people on Foxtel, Gem's not, if you're used to just watching it through Foxtel, Gem's a pain in the neck to get to. And also in pubs and clubs around Australia, if you want to really ruin your night, walk into a pub and say, hey, could you get Gem on for me? And they'll look at you as if to say, what? Just put it on Channel 9. How could Australia versus New Zealand in the first game of a World Cup at the Sydney Cricket Ground not warrant being on the primary network? What the hell are Channel 7 doing? Is this they're still
Channel
angry at cricket? Channel 9. Well, are they still angry at cricket because they parted ways with them a few years ago? Kerry Packer would never have allowed this.
Can't do anything but agree with you, Paul. It's a bloody travesty. It's a joke. It's a joke, I tell you. All right, now my can't let it go. I've got a couple. Firstly, just want to put out there. So I clipped on Twitter. I was watching the cricket today, the T20 World Cup, and they went away to the crowd and it had a toddler falling over the edge of a sort of fence, and the dad running after the toddler, panicked. And it's got a few people are commenting it on Twitter. I think we can all relate to having toddlers and taking your eye off them for a minute, but I hope the mother doesn't see this because the dad is in trouble if she does. All right, my can't let it goes. On the weekend, cricket everywhere in Sydney, so it didn't rain for a couple of days, so it was fantastic to see that. So I love seeing all the club games and all the school cricket, and just love that. Every summer when you first see that, just warms your heart. And COVID messed up the beginning of last year. Rain's not doing many favors for them this year, but glad to see them playing. And my second can't let it go is I heard Lisa Stalaker on ABC Radio talking about the WBBL being conscious of not getting complacent. The fact that, we saw with the Big Bash how quickly the market caught up and then overtook the Big Bash. And Lisa was saying the WBBL has to really be careful not to allow that to happen. And just got me thinking, because I hadn't really thought about that. But Lisa was saying, maybe a shorter tournament in a couple of years will be what the WBBL needs. So I'm really hoping to get Lisa on the program to talk to her about it. But I've been thinking a lot about it, way too much, in fact.
It's a good point. With the IPLW is going to be a juggernaut when it starts, and the WBBL will suddenly find that it'll go to second place very, very quickly. But I just wish that the WBBL and I wish that Channel 7 would show every game. And I mentioned that they shouldn't have the Australia New Zealand men's World Cup game on Gem, but why not have the WBBL games at least on 7 Mate? Because what else are they showing? If it's hard up against a World Cup, and that's going to kind of divert the eyes. But if there was no World Cup on, and I knew right now I could flick on 7 Mate that there was a WBBL game, I'd watch it every night. So I wish they'd get to that level.
Yeah, agree. At least they're using DRS for some games.
They've improved a lot. So it's going really well compared to what it was in terms of the televising. So I'm not criticizing the networks. I'm saying I think the ratings would justify it. I think it'd be in their own interest to show more games.
Well, in that first game of the WBBL, a terrific win to the Sixers where Maitland Brown hit a six off the second last ball to win it for the Sydney Sixers. I think around 300,000 people watched that opening game on free to air and pay TV. So that's pretty good figures for a domestic tournament, let alone a women's domestic tournament traditionally. So, yeah, you're right. I think they should definitely put it on all the time.
Well, that's quite refreshing. We've agreed with each other on pretty much everything tonight.
Yep. All right, let's stick around so we can find something to argue about. I had the best weekend, Paul. Like on Sunday, there was, the two T20 World Cup games. There were 3 WBBL games. And then, you go, okay, what a great day. And then you wake up on Monday and you go, oh, there's 2 Shield games and there's 2 World Cup games and there's a warm-up game and there's another WBBL game. It is bloody heaven. And I put out a tweet, and it's no lie. At the end of the day, I got a direct message from my wife with a link to an article about why women are leaving their husbands. Yeah, I don't know how. I better be careful about these five match days going forward.
I should just say, I've had the notes up till now so that I don't have to see my own head on the thing. But I've now switched back to seeing myself. Have I had my head like barely out of camera shot the entire podcast?
No, just since we did the preview when you started reading.
Oh, so since like most of the podcast. Thanks for letting me know, mate.
I thought you were reading. That's why.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know, but I could have had it at a different angle. Sorry to everyone if you just see my bald head for the whole show.
Martin wasn't happy. Martin Lawrence wrote, "We can only see your head, Paul," and I've written, "He has shrunk." So. Anyway, well, look, everybody, thanks for listening to Cricket Unfiltered. So Saturday, Australia plays New Zealand. Paul and I are both going to be there. We'll endeavour to record something Sunday, and we'll go from there.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.